Hey guys, welcome back to episode 7.
We were just
I'm
singing before we started recording, if you can't tell.
I'm in a very stingy mood. I am Megan, one of your hosts, along with Emily.
Hey everyone, welcome back.
And today we're going to be talking about one of the most famous, one of the most infamous and famous are the same, but one of the most famous serial killers out there, and his name is Ted Bundy.
Yep.
He was a serial killer, for those of you who don't know, who murdered and kidnapped dozens of women, young women, from the years of 1964 to like 1978. There is so much information about him out there. There's millions of documentaries, millions of like movie adaptations. So this is going to be to preface a very brief overview of like all the things that he's done.
Yep.
Um, so if you want to go out, read a book, go find some more. But for the
Mm-hmm.
interest of our podcast, we're just going to talk about it as a whole. But per usual,
Yes.
for the ones who already do know about background,
Mm-hmm.
Emily is going to kick us off by telling us a little bit about our guy, Ted Bundy.
Yes. So, Theodore Robert Bundy. That's his full name. He was born on November 24th of 1946, and he was born in Burlington, Vermont, which I didn't know. I don't know if that's common knowledge. Kind of close to where I grew up. Not really, a few states over, same region. Um, But yeah, so Bundy grew up in Burlington, Vermont, or he was born in Burlington, Vermont, actually ended up growing up in Philadelphia for the beginning of his life before he moved to Washington. A little bit of background on his family. His mother was named Eleanor Cowell. She was single, she wasn't married, and actually, kind of a fun fact, it's actually not fun at all, but his father was never really confirmed. So his original birth certificate said that his father was a U.S. Air Force veteran named
Hmm.
Lloyd Marshall, but in a copy of it, it said that his father was unknown. And the mom actually claims that she met a war veteran named Jack Worthington, and he ended up abandoning her after finding out that she was pregnant. But I think it's kind of interesting that there are so many of these names thrown out, and actually
Mm-hmm.
nothing is confirmed. There was also a rumor going around, since all of these names were getting thrown in, that Bundy was actually a child of incest between his mother and his grandfather. That ended up not being true, and obviously proven wrong by science, but that I also thought was just
Mm-hmm.
interesting. So like I said, he was born in Burlington, but ended up kind of growing up in Philadelphia with his maternal grandparents, who raised him for many years. Bundy actually really liked his grandfather, and he said that he identified with him, which is a little bit scary because he was known to be racist and a bully who beat his wife, in quotes, by some
Mm-hmm.
neighbors. So I don't know if that's the best person for him to identify with. Um,
You
you
live
know,
and you learn, I
you
guess.
you do. So yeah, he lived in Philadelphia for a bit. In 1950, he ended up moving with his mother to Tacoma, Washington, where she ended up meeting this man named Johnny Bundy, and they had 4 kids together. And Ted was not a huge fan of this man. He would always say he wasn't his real father. So yeah, he wasn't a huge fan, but he now lives in Washington. So his siblings all describe him and say that he had a lot of disturbing behavior from a very early age. He would surround his younger children or his younger siblings with knives while they were napping, and he
Mm.
liked to quote inflict pain and suffering and fear onto them. Um, so that's not good. um, he also injured at least one other girl in their neighborhood by creating these like traps around the neighborhood. He would also force younger kids into the woods, make them take off their clothes, and it didn't go into detail, but probably some other things. And he also engaged in animal cruelty.
Mm.
So he definitely has that background of kind of like we talked about with Jeffrey Dahmer, sort of enjoying playing with deceased
Animals.
animals. Um, and yeah, so some traits that we've seen before. So a little bit later on, he was arrested in high school for burglary, motor vehicle theft, and after he graduated high school in 1965, he went to UPS, which is the University of Puget Sound, for about a year before going to UW to study Chinese. About 3 years later, he actually ended up dropping out of college. He worked, he traveled around, he met people, possibly some, we don't know, crimes. But he ended up back in Washington in 1969, where he was a psychology major at UW again. And he was actually doing really well. He was an honors student. He was well regarded. He took a lot of jobs on campus, and he ended up graduating in 1972. So he definitely turned himself around there after he took a little break. I do think it's interesting that he studied psychology.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he didn't turn himself around, clearly. I more mean in a studious...
No, I understood what you meant.
He didn't turn himself around at all, actually, but he ended up graduating.
Presented as if he turned himself around.
Exactly. Yeah, so that was like kind of a bit of background on him. We can definitely see some traits being, about his childhood. We can see his family life wasn't the best.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that was a little bit about him. And now Megan's going to start to talk a little bit about all the crimes themselves, which there's a lot. So like she said, we're going to do a quick little overview, or else we would be here for like 4 hours.
Yeah, and I want to preface, I think that, Emily and I are splitting this up because I was like, you're going to hear me talking for like 6 hours if I stop. But some of the dates of like when everything was happening were different per our research article, where some were like, oh, this happened this time, this happened this time. So if I miss somebody, I apologize. If I get a date wrong, I apologize. But we're going to start with kind of where we're going. So, like Emily said, he lived near like Tacoma, Washington. This was actually very interesting. So in 1961, so this was before all of the murders. Anne Marie Burr, an 8-year-old girl who lived a few miles away from Bundy in Tacoma, um, she went missing, I believe. Well, she did go missing. He was 14 at the time, and he later, and I don't know if it was in an interview or how he admitted to this, but he later admitted that he strangled and sexually molested his first victim in an orchard, and there was a apple orchard of some kind like behind his house.
Yeah, I think that's also like the forest that I was talking about, because it was like just basically a plot of land that he would bring people. So
yeah, so he did that when she was 8. He was 14, but he denied any involvement in her disappearance, and this continues throughout all the crimes. Then we move a little bit later to January 4th, 1974. So he's grown up. He's an adult now. He entered into the apartment of 18-year-old Karen Sparks in Seattle. She was found brutally beat and sexually assaulted, and she was sexually assaulted at the time. She actually survived, but suffered permanent brain damage from the attack. So nobody knew who it was, and was just like, this poor girl went through something tragic. The following month, February 1st, 1974, he later broke into 21-year-old Linda Ann Healy's apartment. He beat her until she was unconscious, drove her to a remote area where he ended up sexually assaulting her and then murdered her. They didn't know who did it, where the remains were until about a year later, and they were found outside of Taylor Mountain, which is like near Seattle. And some of this, where the remains were found, is very important, so just keeping that in mind for later. July 14th, 1974, Bundy claimed 2 victims, Janice Ott and Denise Mashid. They both vanished within a 3-hour time period, so there were witnesses that said he asked both of these women, or some person, because they didn't know who he was yet, asked the woman to help carry his boat and help him move it out because it was in this like marina. A lot of the witnesses heard him introducing himself as like, oh, I'm Ted, that sort of thing, but no one was able to identify him. August 30th of 1974, Law he moves to Utah. And keep in mind, at this point in time, a lot of the crimes they were kind of like, who is this guy? They had a name, but they didn't really have evidence as to like who it was.
And a
Um,
lot like wasn't, we'll see this, like a lot wasn't actually fully all in Washington, which is why it was hard to
mhm.
connect them all. So we'll talk about that, but that's like a huge reason why like now he's in Utah and like doing all of this.
Yeah, and it's like slowly as time goes on, they started to connect the dots and be like, okay, like, well, now these killings happened here and here. But at the time, it was more so like, oh, Washington, there's killings happening in
Yeah.
just Washington. So
Yeah.
you moved to Utah to practice, well, to be a law student in 1974. And the killings didn't start about until 2 months later in Utah. So November 8th of 1974, he approached a woman named Carol DeRoche at a local mall. He was dressed up pretending to be a police officer, and he was telling her that someone tried to break into her car while she was in the mall doing whatever and asked her to come to the police station to fill out a police report. Um, she was a little suspicious when they were driving because they got into his infamous yellow bug, um, and she felt kind of weird about it and tried to escape from the car. And on top of that, what was interesting is he took off the inside handle of the car, so like people can't pull it to get out.
Yep.
But after struggling, a physical struggle while he was driving, she managed to escape. And he was so rageful, is kind of what reports say now. He instead killed Deborah Kent, who was a 17-year-old high school student, and he did end up killing her. But Carol DeRoche went to the police, like, told them about this, did a police sketch, all those sorts of things. But of
Mm-hmm.
course, he's in Utah at this point, and nothing really came of it yet. Then on January 12th of 1975, Bundy moved from Utah to Colorado. So that is where we have someone else get murdered, unfortunately, and that was Carolyn Campbell. She disappeared from her hotel in Colorado and was found a few weeks later in a snowbank outside of her resort village, where she was beaten, sexually assaulted, and now we kind of go into later down the line with more murders, which Emily is going to touch on.
Yeah, so I'm gonna do that. But first, like, I feel like you can already tell in these ones, like, how much of, like, a similar MO that he had during all of this.
Mm-hmm.
He would, like, always lure them in by convincing them that, like, they needed his help or he was a police officer or someone, like, important. And then would, again, like, get them unconscious, usually, like, some type of sexual assault, and then bring them somewhere
Yeah.
remote, and then he would kill them.
He was
Um,
also like a young, like, I don't want to say, but like he was told or like described as like a young, attractive guy. Like,
yeah,
it
yeah,
wasn't like he was some creepy 6-year-old man. He was like a
right,
young 20-year-old who was just like, oh, I need some help. And then luring these like young women
yeah.
who were just people into his little clutches.
Yeah, like high school and college age. So like of course
Mm-hmm.
they're, if this like older man that they think is attractive is asking for help, like they're going to help him. So
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to add that in, that like you can already see that connection all throughout them,
Mm-hmm.
which is what makes him a serial killer, is that there
Yeah.
are all these similar things. So, August of 1975, um, he was in Utah.
Mm-hmm.
He like went all over multiple times and
Which
was
makes
like,
sense why, but
exactly, pulled over for driving suspiciously. And there were some things that were found in his car by the police on that stop, which were like handcuffs, a rope, mask made of like pantyhose, and an ice pick. Um, and again, also like there was more found in his apartment. He was put under surveillance, all of that. So that like stop was pretty large.
mm-hmm.
He did a police lineup in October. The lady at the shopping mall, DeRoche,
Mm-hmm.
and she was there. She identified him, Washington, all of that. began to share information with Colorado, Utah, all of these places that were all connecting all the dots. Washington and Utah and Colorado were all in coordination to all like put all of these crimes together to create charges against
Mm-hmm.
Bundy. All right, so next, on March 1st, 1976, he was actually convicted for his abduction efforts. He was found guilty of aggravated kidnapping, and he got a 1 to 15 year prison sentence. He ended up getting out early, but 1 to 15 years. So then in October of 2000, no, not 2000, October 21st, 1976, I really can't talk, Bundy was charged with first-degree murder, linking Campbell's death through hair that was found in his car.
And keep in
He
mind, Campbell was in like Washington, I believe. Or
Yeah,
wait,
that was like
yeah.
one of the that was like one of the more, you know, first ones.
And there's so many, so
She appeared, I
apologies.
believe, from the hotel.
Yes, yes, yes. So there's like all these connections, and keep in mind, like going back to how they all started to talk and communicate to each other, because like Washington was looking for this guy,
Yeah.
Utah was looking for this guy, and they all kind of started to be like, like we're all finding these people dead with a lot of similarities.
Yeah.
So that's when it really started to come together, and they were like, ooh, like you're connected and all these things. But anyways,
Yeah.
continue.
So he actually also used her credit card, which is definitely a big no-no because that could be tracked. And then he went to trial for that in 1977. So
Here's where things
now,
get interesting.
yes,
Uh,
do you want to talk about the escape, Megan?
Sure.
Okay, go for it.
So in June 7th, oh my God, June 7th,
We both can't talk
1970,
today.
um, he was taken to a library and was like, I'm gonna do research. And he leapt from the second story window and then he like ran to the mountains. This resulted in the area like a 6-day manhunt where they were like checking people's trunks, cars, like handing out flyers, like they were looking everywhere for him. Eventually, they found him driving a stolen car and then returned him to custody. Then, a couple of months later, December 30th, 1977, he, for months, was not eating or eating very minimal, only the amount to survive. And that caused him to be very underfed or undernourished, and he was very small. So he slid through an opening in his cell and he escaped again. They looked everywhere for him, but he was smarter this time, and he winded up making it all the way to northern Florida. So from Utah, I believe, all the way to Florida, he made it. And I think on top of that, his pattern, because there's all these maps out there of like where he went from like Colorado to like South Dakota to like Chicago and then back down. So he was everywhere, but they like could not find him anywhere. Um, so he took as far as we're aware, on January 15th, 1978, is kind of the last, like, one of the last kind of things or crimes he committed where Bundy broke into the Chi Omega house at Florida State University. He ended up killing two students and injured three of them. This was at 3 in the morning. He strangled three of them. Two of them did not survive. One of them did. And then he sexually assaulted the other. She has sexually assaulted three more. Um, he then also, I believe a day later, he went and killed someone else. But it wasn't a small incident, but it was very strange where a lot of people were really focused in on the Chi Omega killing. Um, February 15th, 1978 was the final straw for Mr. Ted Bundy being out in the wilderness. And he was driving a car and it was at night, so he didn't have his headlights on. And what ended up happening was he got pulled over. He refused to give them any sort of identification, obviously, because he was on the run.
Yeah.
And they took him to the police station and booked him. And for like weeks, they were like, who are you? And he was like, oh, I don't know. Like, I'm not giving you my name. All these things, refuse.
Sus.
Yeah, very crazy. And then eventually he revealed and said he was the FBI wanted Ted Bundy, and that is where it kind of
What an
finally went.
ego.
Yeah, it was so bad. And then he went into his trials. And again, I believe there are more like published criminal cases in which he's
Yeah.
killed other people, but these are like the main ones that are kind of outlined that like indicated his pattern, like how far he was willing to go, all these sorts of things.
Yeah. And I'm sure that there's like, unfortunately, a lot more
Oh,
that aren't even,
we will
talked
get
about.
to the number that he said that he
Yeah.
has killed people, but until then, they've finally caught him
Yeah.
after he didn't
Oh
have
my
his
god.
headlights on. Oh,
Sorry, a fruit fly attacked me.
and blah 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 blah. Anyways, Bundy, final trial was on January 7th, 1980. I
Mm-hmm.
want to say this is where it got a little fuzzy, is that he was tried multiple times.
Mm-hmm.
I believe it was a hung jury
Yeah.
for the majority of them, but the
Yeah.
last one is where he got sentenced.
Yes. I think
And
you're
like
right.
yeah, and like Emily said, I didn't put any of the other ones down just because he's crazy. And on top of that, during those trials, he was acting as his own counsel. And keep in mind, for any court case, you can act as your own counsel. It's not recommended at all. But he was egotistical. So he thought he was epic, and he was like, I'm a law student,
Yep.
and he was going to be his own lawyer. So he literally was sitting at the bench, like up on this, like up trying to gain witnesses and like cross prosecute or whatever it's called. Um,
Cross
it
examine.
cross-examine, that was the
Mm-hmm.
word, yeah. And he would cross-examine them as he's like literally the one on trial for murder. So after those ones and after it was a hung juror and they were like, we don't know, because he also never confessed, truly confessed. He never said,
Mm-hmm.
I, Ted Bundy, did it. He always alluded to the matter.
Yep.
But his final trial was on January 7th of 1980. He did not act as his own legal counsel. He was represented by Julius Africano and Lynn Thompson. They to um, tried to get him off by guilty by reason of insanity. Um, and again, he wasn't your like typical client you would see maybe in a courtroom where they're told to like be quiet, like don't say a
Mm-hmm.
lot. He throughout his trial became like increasingly agitated. He would lose control and he would talk out of order. He had this manufactured facade of competence and composure. It was always kind of like this on and off thing he would turn off. And the one thing that was incredibly crazy was in this trial, he was dating a woman named Carol Ann Boone,
Mm-hmm.
and they called her to the stand. And while he was on the stand, he just goes, and this is a quote. Well, he said, Carolyn, like, do you want to marry me? And she said yes. And then he said, I do hereby marry you. And then the marriage was legally binding. And days before this all happened, Boone had secured a marriage license in Orange County, and it's stamped with a notary public. So they were actually married, and he did this while he was on his murder trial.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Perfect
They
time
ended
to
up
do it.
having a child too. It's
Perfect time to
crazy.
do it.
Yeah, and it's so uncomfortable because there's footage of these trials out there, and
Yeah.
it's like, Carolyn, do you want to marry me? And it's like, oh my lord, this is,
I
ooh.
cannot even imagine being in that room and being like, what is going on?
I would just be like, why are we here? Like, also,
Scary.
personally, I would not want to say yes to, like, whether or not she believes that he did it. Like, I wouldn't
It's
want
not a good
to.
look.
No, I wouldn't also want to be like, yeah, when they're getting tried for murder, like, he better give me a ring when he's not on the stand.
Yeah. Yep. I would have to agree with you on that one.
Yeah. Well,
Like,
kind of with all of that laid out on the table, he was eventually executed, which we can get to.
yeah,
But Emily can dive a little deeper into the criminological
yeah,
theories,
yes.
because, like we both said, criminology, psychology, this is a very interesting one where it kind of brings in both of those sides.
Yeah, so we'll start with some criminological theories. If you've studied criminology, you've heard these ones a lot of times. First up is the routine activity theory, which this is a huge one for him because of who he targeted. So this theory in general is like when the killer or offender studies his targets, environments around them, to all find different victims who are in these like same routines. Normally, according to the theory, and also in his case, college campuses, bars, beaches, etc., just to try to like find these people in these same routines. I think about this one a lot whenever like I would walk to class or something because I would always go the same way. And so I kept being like, okay, well, I should probably like change up my route, like, just in case. Like, my
Just
head's
in
always on a
case.
swivel. But that one is really interesting, especially on a college campus, because a lot of times we all go the same routes, like to a certain class or to this or
Hmm.
the same times during the week. So that was a huge one in this case for him because he did
And he also was a
target.
student. Like,
Right,
he,
right.
at both
He
of
knew
these
his way. It was around
schools,
his way around.
and he, like,
Yeah,
that's 100%, like, he could have just saw one and then he kind of realized. And think about even, like, your friends, right? Where it's like,
yeah,
when we were living together, like,
yeah.
we knew each other's schedules for the most
Right,
part, or we're like, oh, well, Emily's going here at this time. Like,
right.
it wasn't so obscure where it's like, oh, you wouldn't know where someone's going. Even like other friends where it's like, oh, you have an idea that they're in class right now.
Yeah. Or you're always like, oh, I passed them on my walk to class while they're walking home or something like that. So
Mm-hmm.
that's like a huge one. Another big one, specifically in this case, is the rational choice theory, which is where it's like certain acts or abductions or murders are all like meticulously planned,
Mm-hmm.
even when there's legal risks or illegal risks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There.
Like inside of these things that this person is coming up
Mm-hmm.
with. So they use their own like self like interest to make these calculated decisions while doing these certain acts, which we see a lot in this case. Like clearly one person knows that you're not supposed to murder people or sexually assault people or any of that. So he definitely used this to like plan out all these places that he was gonna, or these people that he was going to target, and then knew that it was wrong but continued to do it anyways. So that's like
Mm-hmm.
another one that we see a lot, especially in this case. But I would say that routine activity theory is definitely like number one theory
Yeah.
for him.
Yeah. And honestly, like, it makes sense. I feel like, I don't know. It just feels like that makes sense because how could you figure these people? How could you just randomly grab these people? And towards the end, he got
Right.
sloppy, if you want to call it
Yeah.
that, where he
Yeah.
just was like, I don't care. I'm just going to go in and do it.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it makes a lot of sense for all of the victims he killed over a span of time.
Yep. Yeah. And especially because they were like the same ages and like same
Hmm.
age range and all of this stuff. So, do you want to talk
Hmm.
about some psychological ones?
Yeah, so obviously Ted Bundy, psychopath. But
Yeah.
kind
Yep.
of looking at how we talked about with Jeffrey Dahmer, some of those like psychological concepts that might have added to kind of the person he was. And I want to preface like I'm not the one diagnosing. These are like actual psychological individuals. And on top of that, these people can still have these things and they're not like the worst of the worst. So just prefacing that. So Bundy
True.
was diagnosed by Hervey Cleckley, him as a psychopath, as well as having necrophilia, paraphernalia, and sadism. Psychopath, a psychopath, what that is also known as antisocial personality disorder, and it's this idea that like you aren't concerned with other people, you learn like how to mimic behaviors. It's kind of like everyone is like a piece on your chessboard. Um, but like a lot of people do live with this diagnosis and they're okay. Like they're not this. So really want to preface that. But By definition, it refers to being a psychopath as social predatory predators who charm, manipulate, and ruthlessly plow their way through life, completely lacking in conscience and feelings for others. They selflessly take what they want to do as they please, violating social norms and expectations without the slightest sense of guilt or regret. And obviously, for him, it was very clear that he didn't have a lot of regret for the things he was doing, especially because even towards when he was on death row, he never truly confessed to the murders. It was always like, oh, like hypothetically, if someone did this, like to the day he died, like pretty much said that he was innocent. It was all just these like hypotheticals of like, oh,
He also
maybe someone
kept
did
doing
this.
it, so it's not like he had that much
Yeah,
remorse to ever stop himself.
no. And I mean, he escaped prison twice and then went and
Yeah.
killed multiple more people.
Yeah. So,
So with that being
eek.
said, he did go to the electric chair and died on death row. I don't have the exact date, unfortunately, but everyone was very pleased that he was gone because he was someone they were like, he needs to be gone from this world.
He also wasn't
Um,
just a threat to like Washington or, the Northwest, but he like was all over too. So like that's
he went,
scary. Like literally you're living
yeah,
anywhere and you never know.
and this is also like there are many cases to this day that are unsolved that he very much could have been a part of, and he
Right.
admitted to, well, he somewhat confessed to killing a lot of people that weren't even accounted for
Yeah.
when they counted how many people that he murdered. So, with that being
Yeah.
said, going into our frequently asked questions section,
Yep.
our
Yep.
favorite section. Great time to relive everything we've talked about. And
Yes.
Emily can kick us off with that first question.
Yes. So, first question, how many people did he kill? This is an interesting one, like Megan was just alluding to.
Mm.
So he was convicted and technically confessed to about 30. And like a lot of people already thought that that number was higher, probably like 36. But he actually, in a taped confession, he spoke to the number that he killed more than 100 people.
There was a number that, a quote, I wish I wrote it down, but it was like, someone said, oh, like, you kill, or like, alluded to him killing like 36 people, like Em said, and he said, add a zero, another digit to that. And it was
Yeah,
like 360. So he's confessed to doing 100, he's
yeah,
confessed to 36. Like, it's all over the board. And some of this could be true. Some of
yeah.
this could also be like he's just thinks that it's like a kind of like a ego
An
thing and
ego
is like, oh, I
boost,
got
yeah.
away with these things, but I
Yeah.
do believe he killed probably more than 100 people and we just don't know it.
I mean, I would assume so, especially like when you talked about like that he was at Florida State, like unfortunately he killed like 5 people in the span of like 2 days or 4 people
Hmm.
in the span of 2 days. Like he really could do anything, which is
Oh yeah, and who knows?
horrifying.
Hmm.
So the next one is, did he actually escape from prison? We talked about this already. He did. He jumped from a window of a courthouse during a trial, and he was actually found a few days later. That's when he ran away. He was found. The second time he did escape from jail through the ceiling of his cell, like Megan said. He
Hmm.
got super thin, and so he could fit, and he scurried up through the
And
walls.
they
He
never
again was
found
obviously
him.
right.
Yeah, they just kind of were like, they looked for him everywhere, but eventually, like, Florida versus Colorado or Utah or wherever that was, like, that's a far distance. Hard to
Yeah.
figure out, especially when you're thinking this is in the 1970s where it's like they don't have GPSs, they don't have phones, like, it's a different world.
Yes. And then I'll answer one more, then we can pass it over to Megan. But what were his types of victims, which we also have kind of already talked about? He largely targeted young white females who were mostly in college, majority in college. He lured them in by faking injuries and asking for help, like we said, the boat, or, any type of help he would say, and he would pretend like he was a police officer, etc., all to get him into the car. So that age range of the victims was definitely like around the college
Mm-hmm.
age.
Yeah. And then for our last two questions, did he actually get married and have a child? We already talked about the marriage thing.
Yep.
He did get a marriage certificate in Orange County. Well,
Yep.
his wife then at the time did. And he did have a child.
Mm-hmm.
He fathered a child while incarcerated in Florida's death row. It was very interesting because technically the whole thing was like they didn't allow conjugal visits for death row, but obviously you can figure it out if you want to. So she did get pregnant while he was on death row, and they had a child. Before the execution, his wife did divorce him and secretly moved away with his daughter. His daughter's name was Rose. The identity of his daughter, though, remains unknown. Nobody knows where she is, where she ended up. Um, that family history, I'm sure, for several reasons. But he still has lineage out there. He might have kids. His kid is probably still alive, grandkids, we don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And this was a big one because he got away with so much, like Em and I have talked about. And the big kind of was like, was Ted Bundy a smart guy? Was he an intelligent guy? Because how would you get away with this? Like Emily said, he was an honors student who attended a University of Washington school where he studied psychology, law, Asian studies. His IQ was 124, which is signifying superior intelligence. Um, so many people do believe that that's how he got away with these killings because he
Mm-hmm.
was intelligent enough to, fake people out and knew where to put them. Like a big
Yeah.
one we referred
And
to
he
this at the
thought them
beginning, but
through.
he thought them through. And a big one at the beginning to kind of touch on is like how he killed a girl in the mountains and then her remains were
Mm-hmm.
found a year later. A lot of people believe that he put a lot of the victims who were unfortunately never found in the mountains because they're huge. In
Yeah.
Washington, they're everywhere. It takes you, an hour and you barely walk a mile in the woods. And it's like that's
Yes.
how they think he hid
And a
so
lot
many
of
of his victims. And
rain as well, which probably,
mhm,
decomposed some bodies quicker than normal.
yeah. So a lot of that kind of plays into it, but he was a very intelligent individual, and that's how, unfortunately, he got away with probably so many of these things, as well as some of those traits that he learned throughout his studies.
Yeah, I think those played a huge part. And I just feel bad for, well, first of all of the families already that he, affected.
Mhm.
But like the ones that still like don't know, like that's what is
Yeah.
just so sad to me, the unknowns. I just like want them to get like justice or like closure or,
Hmm.
yeah, sad. And a
Yeah.
scary one. I don't like serial killers. I like to learn about
No.
them, but I don't like to think about that.
Well, I sent Emily a statistic the other day, literally being like, I think there's 25 to 50 serial killers that are currently active in the United States,
Yeah,
and that was a terrifying statistic.
that
So,
is too many.
too
That's like one
many.
every 2 states.
It's okay. I'll just go cry myself to sleep. Um,
Oh god.
but
Yeah, I don't
everyone out
like that.
there, stay safe.
Yes, stay safe. We'll see you
Well,
guys next week. Let us know if you
well,
have any suggestions or anything we should talk about, any questions for us. Leave them on our YouTube, Spotify, TikTok, all the
whatever
spots.
floats your boat.
Yeah. You know how they say, like, wherever you listen to your podcasts,
Oh,
that's
yes, yes,
us.
yes. That's literally us. Do do do.
Yay. Well,
Well, with
thank you
that
guys
being
for
said,
listening.
yes, we will see you next week. I appreciate you tuning in,
Yes.
and we'll see you later.
Bye, everyone.
Goodbye.